Say goodbye to Jetbrains Fleet, at least if you have been using it solely for Kotlin multi-platform development. Until today, Fleet was the recommended IDE for KMP. Especially when working with Compose multi-platform, Fleet until today is the only IDE that supports the Compose multi-platform preview. With the recent blog post in the official Jetbrains blog published by Hadi Haredi, a new shift in the further development for tooling support for KMP has been announced. Many of us developers were hyped about Fleet when it was first introduced, hoping it would be the IDE that finally made KMP development a little bit smoother. The idea of a lightweight, modern and built-in from scratch IDE sounded great at first. Before working on Fleet, Jetbrains was at least already providing an alternative for working with Swift and therefore Xcode via the lesser-known AppCode IDE, while many Android developers were trying out building apps, now not only on Android but also on iOS, an IntelliJ-based IDE for Swift support came in very handy. However, ultimately it was abandoned based on the Swift support, which was then provided by Fleet. With the support for Swift and many more languages, Fleet as the so-called polyglot IDE promised the idea of having a single IDE that didn't require switching between, for example, Android Studio and Xcode. And to be honest, personally that was the main thing that got me hooked. But when finally testing out Fleet in practice, taking aside that it was also still in preview mode, it never felt quite ready for serious work. Performance was inconsistent, which was in my experience especially noticeable during project import times, and the ecosystem of plugins we often rely on in Android Studio and IntelliJ IDEA just wasn't there. So like many other developers in the community, I was still stuck with Android Studio for KMP development. Additionally, the reality is that almost everyone working with Kotlin multi-platform is already using either IntelliJ IDEA or Android Studio. Having to switch to another IDE just for KMP and a few lines of Swift, for example, never really made sense. Even when the Kotlin multi-platform support for Fleet was announced, we were still ensured that KMP support for IntelliJ IDEs would still be further developed, although support for Compose multi-platform was excluded from the beginning. With the mentioned short blog post, Kotlin Multiplatform Tooling shifting gears, Hadi Haredi announces what many of us had been secretly hoping for all along. Jetbrains will no longer promote Fleet as the go-to IDE for KMP and will sunset the KMP tooling support. Responding to community feedback and Google's official support for KMP on Android, they are shifting focus to enhancing KMP development with the established IntelliJ platform. This means the Compose multi-platform preview, which is already under active development, is just the beginning. We can expect even more improvements for Kotlin multi-platform development in IntelliJ IDEA and Android Studio soon. So no more IDE Swift support for KMP development? I was also a little disappointed at first that we don't have this outlook on a polyglot solution for KMP development anymore, but I've got some exciting news for you. While I was having a look on the Kotlin Slack, I came across a discussion about the blog post about the end of the KMP IDE. In this thread, a user asked whether Swift support for IntelliJ IDEA and Android Studio is planned, and Hadi Haredi himself confirmed it. So we can look into a bright future where IntelliJ and Android Studio offers the same seamless KMP development experience that Fleet once promised us. While the KMP tooling support for Fleet has been abandoned, Fleet itself isn't dead. At least nothing like that had been announced yet. Even though I have no sources to underline this, I assume Jetbrains isn't abandoning it. They are simply no longer positioning it as the go-to IDE for KMP. And honestly, that makes a lot of sense. Fleet still has a huge potential. If you look at the market, there's already a growing demand for modern, fast and language-agnostic IDEs. Just look at how Visual Studio Code has taken off and is now not only the go-to IDE for many developers for various types of languages and frameworks, but also the driver for AI editors like Cursor or Windsurf. Fleet Code carved out its own niche alongside VS Code, becoming a lightweight yet powerful addition to the Jetbrains ecosystem. So what is my conclusion about this announcement? In my opinion, for us as developers working with Kotlin multi-platform, this is the right decision. Rather than relying on a newly created IDE, which was still in preview, Jetbrains is focusing on improving the tools that we already use on a day-to-day basis. This means we can expect a more stable and refined experience in IntelliJ IDEA and Android Studio for developing cross-platform, mobile, web and desktop apps with Kotlin Multiplatform. And by that, let's come to the end of this video. Please promise me don't take shots on every time I said IntelliJ or Android Studio this time. Anyway, I hope you had some takeaways. Like the video, subscribe to my YouTube channel, activate the notification bell, and I hope to see you soon.